¿Qué hubo, raza? Newani Joaquín. Bienvenidos a su podcast, The Gadsden Refund Podcast. Quiero hablar con ustedes about the Chicano Movement. So what we're gonna get into today is was the Chicano Movement. We're gonna reflect on the Chicano Movement. And the question here, rather a rhetorical question, is was the Chicano movement a success or was it a failure? We have the advantage of over 50 years hindsight. We're looking back and also looking at our current situation as Mexicans, as Mexican Americans, and we're wondering, was the Chicano movement a success or a failure? Let me preface uh, this podcast by saying that the struggle for civil rights by Mexican Americans predates the Chicano movement by several decades. In fact, if by Chicano movement we mean the Mexican American struggle for civil rights, well, that actually began in 1848 at the conclusion of the Mexican American War. That being said, I also want to mention something that was shared with my siblings and I. My abuelito shared with us his first-hand account of, uh, his. So he. Okay, so let me. I don't want to get tongue-tied here. Like I said, recently my abuelito had a conversation with us. It was quite shocking because we had no idea. And he talked about his encounter with the Chicano movement over 50 years ago. He went to Los Angeles at the time, as he explained. A lot of Mexican Americans were coming to the big cities of the Southwest: San Antonio, Los Angeles, San Jose, Tucson, Burque, you name it. So the youth, the Raza youth, were going to the big cities in search of work. In the case of my abuelito, he went to Los Angeles specifically. He wanted to marry my abuelita, and so he went to Los Angeles in search of work to raise money for his wedding. And he wound up staying there. But uh, he arrived in East Los Angeles, to be exact, in 1967, to be exact. And as you know, that was the height of the Chicano movement, was 1967. And so the Chicano movement was unfolding all around him. And at first, he tried to avoid it because he didn't want to get sidetracked. His point, remember, was to go there, get a job, raise money, and, marry my abuelita and live happily ever after. But he couldn't help but get caught up in the Chicano movement because it was, happening all around him. And the way he described it was that everybody initially was on board. So he would go to these meetings. He described the whole scene as electrifying. He said that there was something in the air. Every Mexican was excited about what was going on. Everybody was on board with it. Mexicans from every walk of life. I mean, how could you not be? This movement promised Mexican Americans a better life. They had a lot of problems, a lot of the problems that Mexican Americans deal with today. So I guess right there that answers the question. I guess the Chicano movement was a failure since it failed to solve the problems that Mexican Americans were dealing with then. The proof is that we're still dealing with those same problems. So, like I said, he would go to these rallies and these meetings in these huge halls, and they'd be jam packed. There'd be hundreds inside a hall, thousands in outside rallies, and still like hundreds, thousands more outside, wishing and hoping to get in, trying to get in. And he said that next to him on his right hand side was a Mexican that was a seminarian, a Mexican that wanted to be a priest. And then on his left hand side, there was a Mexican that was in law school. And then in front of him was a Mexican that was a gardener. And behind him was a Mexican that was a teacher. And then next to another Mexican that was working in construction. In other words, it's everybody. Wanted to be a part of the movement. Every Mexican wanted to be part of this movement, and Mexicans from every walk of life, all over the political spectrum, liberals, conservatives, capitalists, Marxists, atheists, and religious people, you name it, everybody was on board with it. He said that the problem arose when the movement started becoming ideological. It started getting politicized. So in the beginning, so the Mexicans wanted to solve their problems. So they lived in a barrio where they were majorities. Sometimes, like in the case of East Los Angeles, where like literally everybody was Mexican American, but all the businesses in the barrio were owned by non-Mexicans, and not even people that lived within the barrio. The schools were run by whites. They were doing the jobs nobody wanted to do for the least amount of money. We could still say that today. They wanted access to higher learning. They wanted better housing. They wanted access to healthcare, you name it. And they wanted to go to mass and have a priest celebrate the mass. They wanted a Mexican American priest to celebrate mass in Spanish, and they wanted to hear a homily or a sermon that was about them and the issues they were dealing with. So you get what I'm saying. So they knew, Mexican Americans knew that they had been living in the Southwest, in California, Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, you name it. They knew that they had been living here for decades, for centuries. They knew that their ancestors had been building these cities: San Antonio, Los Angeles, San Jose, San Francisco, Santa Barbara, Tucson, Burque, Alamogordo, Santa Fe, El Paso, San Antonio, you name it. That our ancestors had been building these cities, and we have been a continual presence here in this country before back before Columbus, during the Spanish colony, after Mexican independence, and then after the U.S. takeover. We've been here consistently, yet we were viewed as foreigners in our own land, and our language and our culture was viewed as exotic, as foreign. So they wanted to change all these things, and like I said, of course, everybody was on board. But then, as he explained, the movement began becoming politicized and ideological, and these meetings that were in the beginning all about action, getting people jobs, getting people into school, getting Mexican Americans, to buy from each other, to sell to each other, to keep the money within the barrio, to elect their own candidates, to have politicians that were Mexican American and that represented them, etc. So it was a movement of action, and it went from that to being a movement of endless meetings, sitting around, musing about Marxian socialism, about just arguments and bickering back and forth. He said that in the beginning they were learning about Joaquin Murrieta and Jose Maria Morelos and Miguel Hidalgo and Zapata and Villa and the Olmecs and the Aztecs. And now they were learning about Mao Zedong and Che Guevara. In the beginning, they were, trying to figure out how to run local politics and to run their local schools and get better jobs and get into college and create Chicano studies. And it went from there to trying to end capitalism, trying to end imperialism in the world. So all of a sudden, like my abuelito said in the beginning, there was hundreds and thousands at a meeting. After the movement became politicized, you could barely get 20 people in a room, and the Chicano movement never recovered from that. The same goes for today. You go to these huge cities, San Antonio, Los Angeles, Burque, Phoenix, Tucson, where you literally have millions of Mexicans, and at these Chicano associations, they can barely bring in 20 people, and it's usually the same 20 people that have been there for 30, 40 years, 50 years. We have real problems, right? And we need to solve these problems. The majority of the student body today, I'm talking today, is Mexican American, but yet all the teachers are not Mexican. The school officials are not Mexican. The prisons in the Southwest, they're 75% Mexican American. We have dropout rates that are going through the roof, and they're mostly Mexican Americans in college. Like I said, there's millions of us in the cities, but in the local colleges, there's more. We're not there. We have very low numbers there. But instead, Chicanos, like back then, today, instead of figuring out these problems, they're wondering whether they should spell Chicano with an X at the end, or an X in the beginning, or one X in the beginning and both X in the beginning and in the end. These ridiculous conversations. Like my abuelito said in the beginning, the Chicano movement was like a business, like going to school. You go to school, you go to a business, you go to your work, to your job. Why? To get paid. You're not there to socialize. You're not there to agree with other people, to become friends. You're there to get a job done. You probably wouldn't even associate with these people outside of the job or in school, but you do so to get something done, to get paid. That's what we need to do. We need to come to the table as Chicanos, as Mexican Americans, and leave our theories and our politics outside and focus on our real problems that we're dealing with right now and figure out how we're going to solve them. No longer can we talk about Karl Marx or capitalism or get into anything that's controversial, Palestine, whatever, Israel, Palestine, feminism, any of those things. We should just focus on our problems and on solutions to our problems. We need to treat it as a job. That's what we need to do. And we can do it. That's what the original movement, the original Chicano movement was about. We need to go back to the past, because in the beginning, the Chicano movement was very successful. It was making a lot of progress, a lot of gains. But then when the focus started shifting to ideologies, it was all downhill from there. So now we can look back and learn from our mistakes and realize that we need to come to the table. I don't care if you call yourself a Mexica, a pure-blooded Mexica, a pure-blooded Spaniard, if you're a Marxist, if you're a Católico, whatever, I don't care. We're going to come and sit at the table. You're Mexican, I'm Mexican. I don't care if you call yourself Spanish or Mexica, whatever. I don't care. We're Mexican. We have the same issues, the same problems. Let's solve them. We live in the same barrios. We have the same crappy jobs. We want better education, better healthcare, better housing. You name it. We can do it. Think about it, Raza. I'll see you the guys in the next video. Comment down below. Let me know what we should talk about in the next podcast. Que viva la raza. Rato.